over to you. Thank you very much. So thanks to James and later Gerardo for agreeing to do this. Awesome.
Okay, thanks, Tim. All right, guys, let me just preface by saying that I am by no means an expert at OBS. However, I've been using it since a little bit prior to COVID lockdown, so I've got, a bit of history with it, I suppose. Yeah, I might be the micro expert here. So if you want it, it's available in Windows, Mac, and Linux. I run them in all three without any problems, really. And you can download it from this particular site here, which is obsproject.com. So just do a Google for OBS Studio. You'll find it quite straightforwardly. Download and install. When you first do, it'll run you through a configuration wizard. So it tries its best to figure out your hardware settings for things like graphical processing units and CPUs and all that sort of, video cards, and comes up with some sane settings for your recordings or whatever settings. Okay, so I won't go through that because I've already installed it on my machine. So I'll let you have the joys of running the configuration wizard yourself. It really basically does a pretty good job. So what I'm going to do, and I was telling Tim about this, I've set up a second OBS running on my other monitor. They don't recommend running two OBSs at the same time, but this is the only way I could think of to, well, there's more than one way, of course, but I thought I'd try it this way to show you how to set one up. So this is what you'd be faced with after installing OBS Studio on your computer. I should add, by the way, it's free and it's open source. So it's FOSS, which is excellent. It's used and beloved by YouTubers and, streamers on all sorts of platforms. And in fact, if you're into that kind of thing, in the settings, you can log in to various streaming sites with your account. It takes you straight to them and uploads straight away for you, which is good. Anyway, enough blathering around. This is what you see initially. So I actually have lots of scenes set up. I've just created a new one, a blank one called test. Now, these scene collections are basically collections of things I use for various different use cases. So I've got collaborate lectures and workshops. I've got one made for if I'm making lectorials and recording things, tutorials in R, etc., etc. If I'm just meeting in Teams, I've got a blue screen where I can green screen myself into the Millennium Falcon, for instance, as a joke. So you can create all these different scene collections depending on your use case and what you might need it for. So that's what they're for. They're for different, creating a scene collection is basically for different purposes, if you like, in terms of what you might be teaching or recording or whatever. The other place that you can create different profile is under profile. Now, profile is something to do with your hardware settings. So you probably don't want to be mucking around with too many different profiles. But if you are producing videos for YouTube, Twitch, whatever, you're streaming games, whatever you might be doing, or in general, not you guys, of course, potentially. These are for different hardware settings for potentially different places you want to actually put your videos / live streams. So, YouTube versus Twitch might have different video settings or whatever. And so you create a profile here. So just remember, profile is for hardware profiles and scene collections are for collections of scenes, depending on what you might want to do. Nathan, do you mean my little head down the bottom here, mate? The green screen? Yeah, I'll show you how you do that. It's called head over slides or something. Apparently it's good pedagogical practice if you're going to be teaching live or even videos for that matter. I've gone one step further and created a green screen situation here in my home office, but you don't have to have that. But anyway, we'll get to that. So I'll shut up and start. So the first thing is that OBS uses scenes, and then scenes are made up of sources. So you can have various scenes depending on what you want, let's say, students to see in your video or your live lecturing.
Hey, James, I
yeah.
think the left side of OBS seems to be cut off from what I'm seeing. Is that, I don't know if that's the case for anyone else, but it is for me.
Is that it there? Can you see it better?
Still cut off at the
Yeah,
left.
same for me. Yeah.
Okay, so it is for everyone. So it mustn't be picking up your whole screen. All right, now it's cut off at the right a little bit. So if you just shrink it a tiny bit,
you can still, you see in my head, but you're not.
Yeah, so I'm only seeing part of your head actually. So yeah, that's a good size actually. If you drag that a little to the right, it'll be perfect for.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay.
Guys, if you play with the Teams window size, then it changes the size of the screen. And there is a sweet spot when it shows everything.
Right. Good.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. Well, no, thanks for that, Tim, because I didn't want, because what's happening now is the important part, I suppose.
Yes, the recording might be fine, but...
okay, no worries.
Anyway, it should all work now.
Yeah. So the first thing we'll do is just create a simple scene. So it starts with a generic scene called scene. So if you right click and rename it, I'm going to call it intro text, because you might want to have introductory text at the beginning of your video, say. Don't usually use text in live lecturing, but I guess you can. So that's the name of my first scene. Now I'm going to come over here into the sources little window and hit plus to add a source. So scenes are made up of multiple sources. Here's all the kinds of sources you can have. You can capture audio, you can capture the audio output from something, you can capture a browser, which isn't what you think. Don't use that if you want to capture a web browser. It basically is for capturing a site and streaming it live behind your head or whatever as you go. You can create a color. Now I'm going to create a color because I think text on color is nice. I'm going to call it blue because blue is my favorite color. And I'm going to choose a blue. That's a nice blue. Hope you can all see this. And click on OK. And now I've got a background in the right number of pixel resolution for my particular screen. You can muck around with that there if you want and click on OK. And then I'm going to add on top of that some text. So go down and click on the plus again to add a new source and go down to where it says text. It'll be different on different operating systems, but in Windows it says text GDI plus, and give that a name. So I'm going to call it welcome or something. So some welcome text at the beginning of the video. You can change the fonts and the size and everything here. So I'm just going to use Arial to make life simple. And I'm going to say, welcome to whatever my course is. Welcome to advanced. Welcome to advanced awesomeness. Give it a course code. So maybe try to line it up so that the code lines up under the middle or something like that. And you'll notice it's massive at the moment. So you just right click, make sure it is the one that you are highlighting. So the welcome text gets highlighted. Right click. You can go down into transform and then fit to screen. So it fits in there. Okay, now if you don't like the color of the text, again, click on the text. Maybe white's not so great on this background. Go into the properties and scroll down. There's a whole heap of options you can play with. Scroll down till you change the color of the text. So maybe black would be better. Okay. Now, if you want your head to be on top of that in a video, then you need a webcam pointing at you. And again, add it another source and go down to video capture device. Excuse me, call this, I don't know, this is my second webcam, so I'll call it cam 2 so I can keep track. You might just be using one webcam. Click on OK, and then pick which webcam you want to use. There's my second one. There I am. You can see that I've got a green screen set up behind me, or maybe you can see that. It's just it's a green sheet chopped down the middle and Velcroed to my wall. Nothing too fancy. But funnily enough, we didn't have any green sheets at our house. I guess green sheets aren't something you buy. So I had to go to Spotlight and just, I think it was like $5 for a rubbish green sheet. Okay, so click on that. Now, if you can actually configure that video as well. If your operating system has the drivers installed for the webcam, the proper ones, you can actually go into this and into the properties and wrong one, sorry. Go into the properties by right clicking, getting into the properties here, and you can configure your video. So for example, if you've got it all installed properly, you'll get your webcam controls pop up and you can zoom in, you can zoom out, etc., and set it up however you want, and tilt and pan and all that sort of stuff. So I'll just zoom to about there. Okay, so you can muck around with all this stuff from within OBS itself. Now, I like to put my head on the bottom right corner and make it not so big that it like distracts, but not so small that people have to like go, what the hell is that? So I usually put it down there, and you'll notice now that the sources are in some sort of hierarchical order, and that's important. It's important that you can change the hierarchy of the sources. So for instance, I can click on the welcome text and move it down to the bottom, but then that means it's getting hidden underneath the blue. So things are in layers. So you need to make sure that you don't, for instance, put your camera. It doesn't matter if the camera is underneath the welcome text because they don't really overlap with each other. Right, so that won't change anything. But as soon as I move the camera down to the bottom, then it gets hidden by the blue. Okay, so make sure usually your camera's on the top and you should be fine. Now, you can leave it like that, but if you do want to go the extra trouble of green screening yourself in, it's actually pretty straightforward to do. Like I said, get yourself a green sheet or even a blue sheet that has different colors. Click on the camera. You'll notice that there's a tab here called filters. Click on the filters, and it's an effect filter. So you click on plus, and it's called chroma key. The one you want is the chroma key. Okay, so change it to green screen so you know what it is in the future. Give it a name. Okay, and then you get this. So as I said, you can make a blue screen or a magenta screen or even a custom screen. So if you only have some nasty old sheets from the 70s that your wife or husband or whatever will let you use, then you can actually use custom colors to pick whatever background. But according to my research, and I think common consensus, green is the best. So pick green. And then muck around with the similarity and smoothness are the ones you want to muck around with. So the lower similarity is the more you can see the green screen. You move it up to the point where you can't really see the green screen anymore. And then adjust the smoothness as well. That'll be close enough. I'm not going to muck around too much with that. Whoops, no, that was bad. Okay. Maybe move it out of the way. Sometimes what looks good here in the preview doesn't look real great depending on what you've got going on the screen. So just play with it until it actually does what you want it to do. So that looks all right. All right, anyway, that's close enough. You can muck around with these things for a lot of time if you want to. Okay, so that's good enough for our purposes. You can kind of still see the sheet behind me, but like I said, you can play with it to get it perfect. Okay, so there's your first scene created. It's intro text. When you hit record over here to start recording a video, when you're in this kind of view, this is called the studio mode. This thing on the left is what's coming up, and this screen on the right, when you hit the transition, is what gets seen by or recorded on the video or seen in the virtual webcam if you're teaching live. So on the right-hand side here is what actually people get to see. Okay, so you can transition it across. All right, so we need another scene now. I like to have a web browser, because that's where you can show students what's going on your Learning at Griffith site, or I write my lecture notes in HTML basically. So it's good to have a browser scene. So we add a source to that. Now, most of the time for this sort of stuff, I use window capture. So I've got I think you can see here, this is Firefox. I've got Firefox here. I've already opened up a set of my probability notes from a first year course. This is in Firefox. So have the window open that you want OBS to capture. I'll just stick it over there for the minute. Come over here to your source after creating a new scene for it and click on window capture. And then give it a name. So this is my Firefox browser. So I'll call it Firefox. And then click on OK. And then it will try to sanely find the window that you might want. But if it doesn't, you can click here on the window and click through the ones that are available and pick the one you need. I like not to use the automatic capture method. I like to use this in Windows anyway, Windows 10 one. It's a little bit more robust sometimes. And make sure you capture the cursor, because that means that when you're running through the notes, students can see where you're pointing. Okay, so click on OK. You'll notice that it's a little bit big again for the screen here. So if you right click and go to transform, fit to screen, and that basically fills the screen. You can also then play with the window. And I don't know if you can really see this, but you can play with the actual real window and it will adjust in there as well, the size. Okay. All right. So there's another basic scene. Now, again, you might want your head over that, but you might think, oh, that rigmarole again. Well, no, you don't have to go through the rigmarole again once you've done it once. Transition back to where you have done your head over green screen or whatever. Right click on it, highlight it, right click, copy. Okay, transition back. So you do all your work on the left-hand panel. Transition back to the scene here. Click anywhere in it, right click and paste reference. And there you've got your head. Now, the beauty of this is that when you transition now between these two scenes, it looks to students or whoever's watching your video recording that the background's moving, but you aren't, because it's in the perfect spot. Actually, that's really going to bother me. Sorry, I'm going to go OCD on you slightly. Sorry, guys. I just want to see if I can get that filter a little better. Like I said, this doesn't matter. I'm just being, like I said, OCD, but hopefully. Just a little less.
I think the dark blue t-shirt's a little...
Yeah, it's not helping. There you go. There's usually a bit of configuration tweaks that can get it to do what you need. And it does quite depend on what's behind you as well. So this blue probably wasn't the greatest choice of background, but the white is more forgiving. Okay, so now I can introduce my course. Welcome to Advanced Awesomeness 6021 AWE. And then go, right, the first thing awesome people need to know is probability. And then I can start teaching them probability by, I'll just put this probability window on my over here. And I can start teaching by just running through the actual Firefox browser instead of, and so, yeah, and there's my cursor, run through the maths, whatever I need to do.
James, can I just take a brief moment to make a comment here, just because it's relevant to this point? If you do want to lecture using a browser, which is not a bad thing, if you have a touchscreen device, if you use Edge, then you can write on PDFs anyway using Edge, so you can actually use it as a drawing board as well, which unfortunately Firefox does not do. I usually use Firefox, but I use Edge if I'm teaching.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm going to show you guys actually. I do a similar thing, but what I do is, well, there's various options. I have a touch screen, an old Surface Pro. It's running Windows, and on the modern Windows, you can connect wirelessly another computer and use it, say, as a second or a third screen. So you can open something like Drawboard PDF on that. I'm going to be a little bit fancy. I just got myself a new phone, one of those folding Z Folds, the Z folding phone. And I'm actually going to connect that in and use that as what I'll draw on for the maths. But yeah, there's a heap of different ways you can do this stuff. But drawing on your notes in Firefox like that, yeah, it's not an option, unfortunately. So Tim, I think, sounds like he's across how you do that otherwise.
Yeah,
but not everyone. Yeah, so yeah, not everyone writes their notes in HTML either like this. So, if it's in PDF or something, there's a few options for you. Okay, so that's the next scene, and then probably add another scene. This is going to get boring, but just to reinforce, I use RStudio a lot. So I like to share that so students can see what's going on. So I'll create a scene for RStudio. Again, make sure that RStudio is in fact open. So open it first, stick it there behind so we can see what's going on. And then add a source, a window capture, call it R. Now another little gotcha, although it's not a big gotcha because OBS whinges at you if you try to do it, but you can't call a source the same name as you've called your scene. So I've created a scene called RStudio here. I can't then create a source called RStudio. So I'm just going to call it R or whatever. Okay, it's already auto grabbed it, which is nice. Again, I'm changing the capture method to Windows 10 because just experience has shown that that's more stable. And okay, and so now again that's too big, so right click and go to transform so it fits to the screen. Okay, so that's RStudio running a little COVID spatiotemporal map thing of cases. And then again, I've already copied and pasted before, so it's still in the clipboard. I just click on that, right click and paste reference, and my face is there ready to go. And I've got another scene now, a third scene. Okay, so then what you do when you're actually teaching or making a video is you make sure as you're talking, so I could be talking about the dramatic increase in COVID cases in the first 6 months or whatever, but looking at this graph and blah, 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 blah. And while I'm doing that, I'm going across here because the next thing I want students to see will be that. And then I transition across to that so I can start talking about Poisson distributions or whatever I might want to be talking about. Okay, so staging area on the left and what gets presented is on the right-hand side. And then lastly, if you want, which is probably useful for us in maths, if you want to create something where you can draw, so I'll just, and draw maths or whatever, I'll just call this my phone because I'm using my phone, but you could use like I said, a Surface Pro or whatever. I can't remember what you said. Sorry, Tim, was it Edge? Something like that. Okay, so I
Edge browser on a any Microsoft writable device. So they're just the browser itself lets you draw on things, which is cool.
Okay, great. Yeah, that is cool. I might have to look at that. So I've got this phone connects into Windows with something called phone link or something. It's Android's something or other. So this is my little phone. Now what you can do is you can share the screen on this guy. This is very phone specific, right? But if you've got an iPad or whatever, it's quite similar. So that's my phone's screen there. And what I generally can do is I can, because it's Samsung and I've got a pen, you can create a note. You can make it full screen, get rid of that, and I can draw on it. Okay, so that's just another window I can capture in OBS. So go here to the source now. I've created my phone scene, capture this window, and I'll call it the Z fold. So I know what it is, and then it tries to actually capture that. So I'm not sure why it isn't, but it would normally capture that. Not sure why it's not going to do it actually. No, that's the guy. Okay. So that technically should capture it, and I don't know why it isn't. It did work the other day. It's always the way, isn't it? So we'll fit that to the screen. Maybe if I...
You didn't do the capture method to Windows 10, could that be it?
Oh, thanks, Tim. Yes, thank you, mate, for picking that up. That's, I think, probably exactly what it is, actually. Thank you, you're a genius. Okay, so there's my little drawing screen. You can resize it and transform it so it sort of centers in the screen if it's not big enough or whatever, or you can actually stretch it as well if you don't mind it looking slightly warped, but you want it to fit the whole screen. So in the transform, you can stretch it to screen, but it does look a little bit weird. Okay, and then you've got a situation where you can use your phone or whatever, or iPad or whatever, to draw. And again, I can put my face down the bottom if I really want to, and then, I can do nasty things with formulas and stuff and draw. Okay, so that's basically the full gamut of how you create scenes and put sources in them. Now, the other thing you can do, which I think is quite interesting, and how are we going? I'm not running too long, am I? That's good. The other thing you can do is you can have these transitions.
Yeah,
so at them,
just keep going. It's all good.
All right, mate.
It's all very useful. So the longer, that's fine.
Okay.
Gerardo's just arrived, so I'm sure he doesn't mind if you keep going for a while.
Yeah, right. Okay. It shouldn't take too much longer. There's just a couple of little things that make life easier, and that's transitions. You can play with the transitions. So at the moment, what's down here in this scene transition box is the default. So at the moment, I've got a fading transition. You might notice when it transitions that there's a small fade that goes on. And it's set for 300 milliseconds. You can change that to make it fade in quicker or slower, however you want. But whatever is set down here in the scene transitions, it's the default when you hit this transition button up the top. But you can also have other kinds of transitions that you can add sort of manually here. And instead of hitting the transition button, you can hit the other one. So this one's a cut. So it's a straight cut across. Hopefully you can see the difference. I've got the fade. I don't really need the fade there. And there's a fade to black as well, which it's useful to end things with. So I could fade. So I'm looking at Studio, for instance. I could fade to black because, thanks very much for your attention, guys. See you later. And then we're out, sort of thing. Okay, so you've got that effect as well. But you can actually have cooler ones than that if you want. So you come down here to the scene transitions area, hit the plus, and then there's all these different kinds. So swipe, for example, just call it swipe. You can actually preview the transition. So this is a left swipe. You can have a right swipe and an up and a down swipe. So that's another sort of transition. So you can add that there. And as soon as you've created one, it becomes available to you in the quick transitions to add it up here. So you hit the plus and click on swipe and it gets added. So there's a swipe one you can hit. Now, the other one I really like to play around with is, where are we? Is the Luma wipe. There's a heap of stuff in the Luma wipes. I'll just do one called burst. I like burst, but there's all sorts. Okay, so call it burst. You don't actually have to give it a name at this point. So if you don't know what's available, don't worry, just leave. Actually, if you don't know what's available in the Luma wipes, just leave it as generic Luma wipe for the moment and click on OK. And then take a look at all the different sorts of ones you can have. So there's barn door kind of ones. You can preview how you want. I really like, so burst, this one's burst. I like that as a transition, but I'm a kid from the 70s, so it reminds me of Batman. There's checkerboard. There's all sorts. So you can create all sorts of transitions between your slides. This is all bells and whistles, but students nowadays seem to like bells and whistles. Plus, it makes things look slightly more professional, maybe. I'm not sure. So anyway, I'm going to do a burst. I just like the burst, so click on OK. There's my burst. That's the Luma wipe one. So if I go here and click on the three buttons, I can rename it now. So now I can call it burst because now I know that's the one I've chosen. Okay, and I can add it to the quick transitions now that it's there, and I can just click on it up here to get a scene that changes in that sort of fashion. Now, the last thing you might want to do, sometimes I do this just to, it breaks the ice a little bit in some of the more turgid, heavy going kind or mathsy kind of lectures or recordings that I do. It's usually more fun to do this in live lecturing, but this is just something I do. There's something called a stinger. You can create a stinger. So where's the stinger? Maybe it's here. Okay, so stinger is basically a video transition. So if you can find or create yourself a GIF or a short video transition, it's often fun. So I have a favorite show. One of my favorite shows is a comedy by a woman called Miranda, very British, but doesn't matter. And I found this really funny scene where she makes this face. So I got that as a GIF. Where did I put it? Downloads? Nope. Videos. There it is. So it's just a GIF or a GIF. Okay, depending on your persuasion. So that creates a stinger, basically, transition. And I can add that quick transition up here. And then suppose I've been doing some turgid maths. Students have lost the plot. That stinger sometimes makes them feel a bit better about what we've been talking about. But that, again, that's just really bells and whistles and just a little gimmick, really. No more than that. Okay, so that's the fundamentals of OBS. It's really actually not as bad as, well, I don't know if people think it's bad at all, to be fair, but when I first started, it felt a bit daunting, but it is actually quite easy to use. Now, in terms of use cases, I have two. Now, over here, you can see you can stream. None of us, I imagine, will be streaming. I've never streamed, so you probably never need to hit that button. And even if you do, if you haven't logged into a streaming site with your credentials, nothing will happen anyway. The other use case for most of us would probably be to make these short video bites that Tim and sorry, I've forgotten who's Tim and the next speaker will be talking about, I think. Sorry, Gerardo. I'm sorry, mate. I'm dreadful. My brain's gone everywhere. And make these little recordings. Now, you just hit the record button and then it records whatever's on the right-hand side. Okay, so you can set things up over here to transition in. You can, when you start recording, you can hit pause, for example. I tend, when I make recordings where I think I might have to pause, I tend to not put my face live in the bottom corner, because when you unpause, if your head's in the wrong spot, you start looking like max headroom, or you start looking real jerky. So, you know, you might want to take your green screen face off those if you're going to hit pause. Now the other, and my biggest use case really, or my second biggest use case after recording short videos for students, is actually to use what's called the virtual camera. And the virtual camera is how I'm sort of coming to you today through Teams. Now, what happens is when you hit the virtual camera, it creates a webcam, a virtual webcam of the right-hand side window. Okay, so at the moment, and then that virtual webcam is available to any piece of software like Teams or Zoom or Collaborate that takes a camera as an input. And so all you have to do is share the camera, share that virtual webcam in Collaborate or Teams or Zoom, whatever, and then control everything via OBS. So change your scenes. Now, anyone who's gone through the clunky sort of interface of Collaborate, where you've got to stop sharing this thing and then share this next thing, if anyone who's gone through that will probably appreciate how nice that feature is for your live lectures. And so, yeah, so I'm doing that at the moment. So I transition across here. This is me controlling what you see via my first instance of OBS. Okay. And so that's a useful thing. I'm using a virtual webcam to present to you at the moment in Teams. Okay, now the other thing, or maybe second to last thing, is audio capture. Now you might notice down here there's an audio mixer. If you go up into settings, and actually, there's a couple more things we should talk about. That reminds me. If you go up here into settings, there's some general stuff you can have a play with, some interesting things in there. The output. Now, you can change the output mode from simple to advanced, and it gives you more options. But I prefer, most people probably should just be using the simple interface to the output mode. This is your bit rate for the videos. Probably don't change this stuff unless you really know what you're talking about. I've got quite a good NVIDIA Quadro graphical processing unit in this laptop. So I've got hardware encoding, the NVIDIA one, which does make good videos. You guys might not have hardware encoding, you might have other things, and that wizard that you go through when you first install it to detect your hardware, etc., will have made this probably the sanest choice for your particular computing setup. So probably don't muck around with that one either. I've got here's where when you're making recordings, here's where you tell it where to put the recordings. So you can, you know, just like any other Windows operating system, you can browse to wherever you want to put them. So I think the last recordings I might have made were for 1010. So that's why I've got that there at the moment. Now, you can, if you don't want to be uploading massive files, I like the high quality, depending on it depends what you're doing really, but high quality medium file size, which is the lowest of the three settings here. I find that's more than adequate. Sometimes I might want larger file sizes if I'm doing some work in R and I'm typing code, so that when I'm recording that video, students can actually see what I'm typing in R. Sometimes if you have a lower video quality, they can't really see it. It's a bit blurry. So trial and error there. And then OBS recommends keeping the recording format as MKV. Now, you may be tempted to change it to MP4 or whatever, but they highly recommend keeping it as MKV and then going and what they call remuxing that into something like MP4. So record your videos in MPK, and then when they've been made, you go up here to File and Remux your recordings. Click on Remux, browse to where those MK4 files were, like so. Double click, and then hit the Remux button, and it will remux that into an MP4 for you. Okay. Now, all right, so that's some of those sorts of things. In terms of other settings, the audio is probably the most important. So if you go down to the audio in settings here, if you want to record things from your desktop, so if you've got something an audio file or something you want students to hear, then you can set up an audio channel for your desktop. And when you do that and click on apply or OK, then it'll show up down here in this little window here as another channel that you can control with it. Okay, so that was just hearing the output of basically it's the output from your computer when it does system noises or you're playing audio of some description. Then the other thing you want is you want a mic. Basically, you want to be able to bring in your microphone noises and maybe control it, especially for your recordings. So in the mic, you just pick whatever one you're wanting to use. So that mine's called this microphone array, I think it is. The other options might be your webcams, but I've got a dedicated microphone that I use. Actually, I've got a couple of microphones, but I use a boom mic that you can't see. It's above my head at the moment. Actually, it just sits here above my head like that. So that's the one I use. So yeah, put that in, click on apply and then OK, and it adds a channel. And you can see now it's picking up me talking, and you can see it picking up that mic. Okay, that's useful for recordings. There's literally nothing worse than getting, I don't know, 10 minutes into a recording and realizing you haven't set up the microphone and everything you've said doesn't come out on the recording. That's not the end of the world. You can always record audio on a separate track and then mix it together in some editing software. But that is a bit of a pain in the butt, especially if you just want to blitz out a recording in one go. Now, the other thing that I find really useful, actually, and I'm not going to do it necessarily here because I don't want to mess up my settings in my proper OBS. This is sort of a second version of OBS running that you're seeing at the moment. But what's really useful, rather than having to click on all this transition buttons and actually, clicking over here to load. So I want to load the browser. So I click down here, and then when I'm ready, I transition. So rather than using all these clicks. Oh, by the way, I think I told you, whatever scene transition is down here is the default when you hit the transition button. So you might want to just keep it as one of the regular ones. So now that's the fade transition is back as the default. Clicking and that's all fine, but it's sometimes easier, simpler, and faster to assign hotkeys to actions. And OBS lets you have hotkeys as well. So if you go into File and Settings, wait for it, there's hotkeys. So you can set keys to start streaming and stop streaming and recording and all of that. I don't find them particularly useful. What I find really useful is to set transition hotkey. So I use Alt-Shift-Right. And so I don't have to actually click a button. I can just sort of use my keyboard in that key combo to transition. And then the other thing, so we'll come back to that. So now instead of clicking here, I just use my keyboard buttons. And the other thing I can do is I can set up so that I can select which scenes I want to load in the left panel with the hotkeys as well. And that is quite useful. And I tend to assign them a number. So Alt-Shift-1 would be my intro text. Alt-Shift-2 would be my browser. So if you can see, oh, you're not seeing. Did it just die? I'm sorry, guys. There you go. That was my fault. Okay, so down here you have these. Sorry, you didn't see that on the recording. So in the hotkeys, I've got the transition, and then down further, it automatically figures out what scenes you've got created, and it adds them in. So the browser, for instance, or the where's the first one? The intro text should be there somewhere too. There it is. So the intro text, if I want to switch to that scene, I can call it Alt-Shift-1, for example. And then when I type Alt-Shift-1, the intro text pops up in the left window. Go down to the browser. I could assign that Alt-Shift-2. Yeah. And click on OK. And so now instead of having to pick these things with my mouse down here, I can just Alt-Shift-1 to get my text there, and then Alt-Shift-right to transition it. Alt-Shift-2 brings up my browser. Alt-Shift-right transitions it, and I can do it all with keyboard shortcuts. So OBS lets you do that as well. My apologies, I forgot that I hadn't transitioned back across to this. Is it dying? I think the desktop share is still dying. Are you guys?
No, we saw that. Well, I saw
that. You saw that?
Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Yeah. So actually, one of the reasons why that messed up actually is because I've already got these hotkeys assigned.
So,
yes. So
I
when
suspected that was what was going on.
When I did the transition, it transitioned on the actual one that I'm using to talk to you guys with. But that's kind of OBS Studio in a nutshell, guys. It's actually really powerful and relatively straightforward software. And it can add something to your recordings or your lecturing, I think, if you're doing it online. Certainly helped me have a more an easier experience anyway with live online lecturing. And
it's so much easier than the alternatives.
Oh, yeah. And did you guys hear I don't know if you think it's good news or not, but Sue Whale posted something the other day. They're bringing back Collaborate. Now, people might groan at that, but honestly, if you're using OBS with the virtual camera, Collaborate is a dream because there's none of that clunky, unshare, reshare stuff that needs to happen. You just share the camera and you're off for the entire 50 minutes. It's a lot easier, in my opinion, to manage than Teams, but to each their own, right? It's up to you. But I for one, am quite pleased to hear that they're letting us use Collaborate Ultra again. Okay, I'll shut up and answer questions if you got any.
Yeah, can I ask? Maybe it was. So thank you and sorry for being late. How heavy is it on the system? Like, can I use it on I have like a Surface. Can I just use it? And
I had when COVID first kicked in, I only had the Surface Pro 4, which is, as you know, an old one, and it worked quite fine.
Okay, so I can handle that and let's say PowerPoint and maybe.
Yep, I used it on my old Surface Pro 4 too, no problems.
Okay. Yeah, it's got a fairly small resource footprint. Yeah, well there you go. Yeah.
So yeah.
Look, I've got this Windows machine. This machine boots into Linux. I've got it on Linux, and I've got a MacBook Pro over in the corner. It runs well and doesn't eat up too many resources on any of them.
Yeah, unlike every other one I tried, like all the official options were just a disaster. They'd crash, or and OBS is the only one that actually just works.
Yeah,
so,
it is.
Yeah, it's typical open source thing. It's like lighter weight, just generally better. But unlike most open source, it's got a slightly easier to use interface. It's not GIMP.
Oh, there's a lot of hours gone into this.
Yeah.
And actually just in
It's
the last
awesome.
just in the last 6 months, it's gone through 2 major version updates.
Oh, cool.
So I think it was 27 point something when at the end of last year, and it's now 29, I think.
So I'll just
yeah,
read out Nathan's comment. I'll read out the questions that come in
Oh,
the chat.
sorry, Nate. I can see them. I'm seeing them.
So
Sorry.
yes, you can see them, but people in the recording can't necessarily. So
Oh,
Nathan is
okay.
just asking about trying to do this kind of thing in a hybrid class. Would you do much the same as this, except on your laptop sitting in the table in the lecture theatre? Over to you, James, who hasn't used a hybrid room.
No, I believe you probably could do that, actually, Nathan. You connect your laptop into the system, obviously, and then get it to project to both the screen and to wherever it goes into the ether, I suppose. And then if you've got your scenes already set up in OBS, then yeah, what you can do, I suppose, is so. Let me just share again. So another thing you can do here is if you right click on the right hand window over here, whatever it is you're projecting at the time, then you have the full screen projector, a window projector. So you can do a window projector of what people have seen, and maybe that could be honed in on. I'm not entirely sure how you would get it to see the whole computer in a hybrid classroom. I'd have to play with what's available in there, but that could be a way to do it.
It seems like a solvable problem.
I reckon it could be. It just depends on how they've implemented the hybrid technology and whether you can tap into the video stream part of it. If you could do that, then you could use the virtual camera maybe to stream to the students who are watching it online. Not sure.
All right. So Agnes is asking, how do you share it in Teams? Will the virtual camera show up in share options? Well, I can answer this one even. Yes and yes.
Yeah. So there's Teams at the moment that I'm looking at. If you go into your settings, I'm not sure this will work here, but if you go into the settings, once you've started that virtual camera, it becomes an option. Can you guys see this here? OBS virtual.
Only because I've got my thing narrow. If you bring it, maybe just bring it to the center of the screen, just depending on how the recording cuts it.
Yeah, this is our meeting at the moment that we're talking in. And down here with the video, this is the settings for device. You can see I'm using the OBS virtual camera as my camera rather than the webcam. And that's where you do it. It'll be different in other meeting software like Zoom, but it's equally straightforward.
And yeah, I mean, I think, with the hybrid rooms, I guess someone's going to learn at some point. So, and maybe if anyone thinks that they've got a good workflow going, maybe we can do another one of these where we actually connect it to the discuss it in the context of the hybrid room, because let's face it, the technology is not going to work as smoothly as we'd like.
No, but
that is the one guarantee.
But based on the where we're moving, like with 1010N, Tim and Fatima and Agnes and Gerardo sounds like he's doing the same thing. The little video bites. This would make your life way easy with the video bites. Actually.
Yeah. So I mean, I guess Gerardo will talk about it in a bit when he talks about his experience, but yeah, we certainly used it for 2205 NSC. So Keith asked, are there more editing options when recording, i.e. beyond start and stop?
Not via OBS itself, but you can then feed the MKV file or the recorded file into something like OpenShot. Like there are free and open source video editing bits of software too. So if you wanted to, let's say, make 5 short video bites, you could just record a straight hour and then put it in there and chunk it up and then edit. I put music underneath using the editing software on certain videos, so there's music underneath them. Students seem to like that.
Licensed music, of course, you mean, James, here?
Oh no, of course. Yeah, no. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, Tim. Yeah.
Yeah. But although I'll just make a point here. Don't try recording an hour until you're very experienced and then dividing it up, because if you make a mistake, you've got to re-record multiple bites potentially. So
yeah, that's a good point too.
Like if you're in the flow, you can try it, but I'd recommend just doing them one at a time. So Gerardo's asking about transcriptions, which I don't think OBS can do, but correct me if I'm wrong, James.
Well, it's not something I've used OBS to do. What I tend to do is, I mean, most things have transcription now. So when I make my little videos for stats, I upload them. I have a YouTube channel. It's an official like Griffith YouTube channel that, well, I get it through Griffith, and it's very good. YouTube's very good at creating the transcript and the closed captioning, but then so is Microsoft. And oh, thanks, James. Handbrake's good too. Just be aware with Handbrake. People who use it probably already know this, but you for certain things may have to go looking for proprietary drivers, which is a bit naughty, apparently. So just be aware of that. Doesn't work with all videos. Yeah, but it just depends what you're using Handbrake for, to be frank. So
the best person to talk to about transcription is probably Sue Whale, because she becomes very rapidly aware when things are going wrong, because she gets complaints from disability services. So, quite fairly, I'm not saying that they're doing the wrong thing, but she is usually aware of how to use our key tools to get around that problem.
I mean, have you guys seen Teams? Teams is pretty good now with its
and so
transcriptions.
So if you upload to Stream, it does a good job. Not with maths often, but I don't think anything can do a good job with maths. I don't think people do a good job with maths.
No, yeah, but a lot of things now, if you make the video recording, wherever you upload it to, or wherever you host it, usually has some sort of transcription and captioning capacity.
Yeah.
Yep.
I had one question, which is a pretty easy one. Can you share scenes with other people? So can you set up a bunch of scenes which can be shared with someone else?
I think you can, Tim. Yeah, I think it's just a matter of copying the appropriate folder. So all of these things go into a folder in your home directory or wherever you've set this up, and I think you can copy them or give them to people, but it might be a little bit tricky with things like the head over slides stuff, because of the different hardware you might have. You might have a different webcam to me.
Yeah.
But you can certainly share your settings, and I've copied the folder. I updated from Ubuntu 18.04 to 20.04, sorry, to 22.04, and you just copy the settings folder across, and it's all there.
Oh, okay, that's cool.
So you can certainly migrate between computers / operating systems, which means to me you can probably share them too.
Yeah. All right. So it's probably not something you could share with other people so easily for the reason you raised, but okay, cool. That's handy to know.
Yeah, so it can be quite hardware dependent, some of this stuff.
Yeah. Makes sense.
Yeah.
And the other thing, I guess, is when you're talking about the medium file size, have you ever had any students sort of complain that the files are too big or that they couldn't open them?
I haven't. No, I haven't. But then, look, I don't know what the norm is now. I've created, because I haven't done bytes really, not really. In stats, it's not uncommon for the poor buggers have to sit there through what I call a quick video, which is 35 minutes long.
Right.
And it turns into 300-400 megabytes. They don't whinge about that at all.
Okay, that's cool.
I think it depends on the student and their NBN connection.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in the past, we had students who had to come onto campus to download stuff because their internet's too shit, and I suspect that that's probably still the case for a few of them. But
yeah. Well, the bigger issue is if you want to upload these videos, it's your internet actually. Usually.
Yes.
Yes,
it is.
My problem is my crappy upload speeds.
Yeah, pre-NBN, it was horrible on my end. I had to like sync them up early in the day almost. But but if you do it on campus, it's very quick, actually.
Yeah.
The campus doesn't, although the download on campus doesn't seem to be much faster than home, upload definitely is.
Yeah. And I can't sort of highlight enough how useful it is to be able to just link in another device like a pad or a phone in my case, or this Surface Pro on Windows machines. I've got two big 27-inch screens in front of me at the moment. I can wirelessly connect just by right clicking on your Windows desktop. If you've got Windows, going into display settings, if you've got them both set up properly, there's connect to a wireless display option here, and you connect to it and they talk to each other, and then it becomes, if it's a touch screen, it becomes a third screen, and then you can stick drawboard PDF on it, whatever. There's ways and means to be able to do your maths live that way and not have to use a mouse.
Yeah.
I mean, trying to create math symbols with your mouse is a nightmare. Yeah. And if you don't want to pay out money for something like drawboard PDF or one of those, is it Journal? X? It's Journal with an X instead of a J, is free and open source and quite good.
Okay.
As well.
Yep. And Edge, which every Windows machine has, also lets you draw, but it's not good. Like drawboard is much better. I haven't tried Journal, but Edge is not a replacement for drawboard. But if you've just got if you just quickly need to jot on a PDF, it's much better than Firefox, which won't let you do that.
I think Jason uses, is it OneNote? I think OneNote you can draw with as well, can't you? Somehow?
Oh yeah. OneNote you can do everything. It's very cool.
Yeah, and I think we all get free OneNote, don't we?
We do indeed. Yep. OneNote's not so. The advantage of Drawboard is that you can just open the PDF and draw on it, which is really good for drawing on slides. So Edge you can draw on PDFs. OneNote, like in theory you can, but it's kind of awful. It's not what it's for. You kind of have to copy page by page onto it, and then
Yeah. Okay.
Like, I mean, if you've got the right workflow, it's good. But if you don't have the right, it's not good for everything. All right. Well, I'm out of my extra questions. Thank you very much, James. That was awesome. And although I already used OBS, I've learned a whole lot about how to use it better.
Oh, cool. Great. Do you want to, I'll show you my normal sort of, these are my scenes in what I might use normally. So I've got a Chrome browser and a Firefox browser, drawboard PDF, the desktop share, full camera and rear camera. Students really like, I've got that second camera, I stick it behind me, and sometimes I just show them my setup and they like it. They think, they go, oh, they like it because apparently that's what live streamers do.
Oh, right.
And now I've got the phone, so I don't know. Like,
you need to talk to Zach Quince at some point, James.
Sorry, yeah.
Yeah, no, he does live streaming, so he was very happy when he got to do the online classes because he was like, "Sweet, I've already got the setup, and you got the setup." So
Yeah, it's So these gamers, these live streaming gamers, I think they've known all about this for ages. The other thing that probably won't affect any of you guys, and I pondered it for about 2 seconds before thinking, I'm not going to do it, but you can also, OBS will integrate with something called Stream Deck. I don't know if you've heard of the Stream Deck, but it's actually a physical thing that you can use on your desk, and you can map different scenes and stuff to it, and you just press a button instead, and it controls it. But that's a tax write-off for another year probably. I don't think I'll buy one of them, but it looks really good. And that's what the pro YouTube and Twitch streamers and all of that's what they use, a Stream Deck. So awesome. OBS will link in with all of that stuff. It's got heaps more capabilities than I'm aware of. Yeah.
I think you've given us more than enough to make nicer videos with. Oh, hang on, we've got a... All right, so Nathan's pointing out something at Kmart. Pretty good cheap equipment for this sort of stuff. Pop-up green screens, ring lights.
Yeah, cool.
Kmart.
Oh, so that actually, no, thanks Nathan for that, because that's something I forgot to say. The quality of your green screen, if you're going to go that way, also depends directly on the light source. So luckily I've got a light sort of almost directly above me, which helps, but you can't get a decent green screen sometimes unless you muck around with the lighting. So yeah.
Very cool.
Tax write-off, absolutely.